Jimmie Johnson makes it official. He's going to IndyCar. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric, and welcome to Out of the Groove. Big news today if you're a fan of American racing. Now, it's not entirely shocking news. This has kind of been hinted at, if not confirmed, for quite a while now, but we finally heard directly from Jimmie Johnson and directly from Chip Ganassi Racing what's going on over there. Earlier this summer, Jimmie Johnson tested a Chip Ganassi Racing IndyCar at the Indianapolis road course configuration. And Jimmie, of course, has said now for at least a year, I think, that his intentions are to run some IndyCar races after he retires from NASCAR. Of course, 2020 is still expected to be Jimmie Johnson's final full-time NASCAR Cup Series season, and today, Jimmie Johnson and Chip Ganassi Racing finally made it official. Jimmie Johnson is finalizing a deal to run for Chip Ganassi Racing's IndyCar team in 2021 and 2022. Now, per the Associated Press, Jimmie Johnson is expected to run the road and street course races on the IndyCar schedule next year. So he's not going full-time, I guess, but he is, from the sounds of it, going to be running quite a few races. I mean, I can't find anywhere where it explicitly says he's going to run all of the road and street course races, but that's kind of what it sounds like. So we're going to see a lot of Jimmie Johnson next year in open wheel racing from the sounds of it. Now, it sounds like sponsorship is still being sorted out, finalized, and everything. Ally is, in the middle of a multi-year agreement with Hendrick Motorsports on the NASCAR side of things. I'm not sure if Ally could follow Jimmie Johnson over to IndyCar as well. Maybe that's possible. Oh, what if Lowe's came back? Oh, I'd love to see Jimmie Johnson in a Lowe's IndyCar. That's probably not going to happen, but I mean, I'm still in the throwback mindset from last weekend. But of course, with Jimmie Johnson running seemingly a part-time IndyCar schedule over the next couple of years, and more importantly, running those races for Chip Ganassi Racing, this also, in theory at least, gives Jimmie Johnson a good opportunity to run at least some NASCAR Cup Series races going forward if he so chooses. Remember, he has never said that he's done racing in NASCAR entirely. In fact, he continues to drop hints that he might come back here or there, perhaps in the future. He's just done racing full time. But this is why it's significant that he is racing for Chip Ganassi Racing on the IndyCar side of things. I mean, for one, Chip Ganassi Racing, that's a powerhouse over there at IndyCar. I mean, he's going to be teammates with Scott Dixon. Come on now. But Chip Ganassi Racing, of course, also runs a NASCAR Cup Series team, and right now they only run 2 full-time cars in the Cup Series. Now, NASCAR, of course, has a 4-team rule. Hendrick Motorsports already has 4 teams, so Jimmie Johnson, there was no way, at least with the rules written the way they currently are, there was no way Johnson was going to be able to come back and race, as a 5th Hendrick car at any point next year, because that's just not allowed. Maybe NASCAR had been the rules for Jimmie Johnson's case, but I don't think so. But Jimmie Johnson now racing for Chip Ganassi, on IndyCar. I mean, Chip Ganassi's got 2 free spots each weekend if he wants to field a third car for Jimmie Johnson to run. Maybe some of the crown jewel races. I don't know. Jimmie Johnson has not dropped any sort of hints as to maybe what NASCAR races he might come back for. Of course, this week with the huge news that I guess his home track in NASCAR, Auto Club Speedway, is being turned into a short track. Maybe in 2022, we see Jimmie Johnson try running the new Auto Club Speedway. That wouldn't shock me. It's all speculation at this point, but Jimmie Johnson continues to make it clear he is not done racing. That's now become very apparent by the fact that he's going to take on a pretty significant IndyCar schedule the next 2 years. He could definitely throw a couple NASCAR Cup Series races into the mix without too much difficulty. Maybe some crown jewel races. I mentioned Auto Club. Maybe some of the road courses. If NASCAR continues to add new road courses, maybe Jimmie Johnson will be intrigued by those to want to make a return. And keep in mind, Chip Ganassi Racing, I said they field 2 full-time cars in the Cup Series right now. Kurt Busch is locked up for next season, but that 42 car, Matt Kenseth said on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio yesterday that it is very unlikely that he comes back to race next season. So more than likely the 42 car is open, and if Bubba Wallace signs with Richard Petty Motorsports, I mean, who are they going to put in the 42? What if Jimmie Johnson ends up racing a part-time schedule in the 42 next year? I don't know. That I guess is probably far-fetched. There's a good chance they'd maybe put Ross Chastain or Eric Jones or maybe somebody else in the 42 car should Bubba go to RPM, and Matt Kenseth, of course, chooses to leave. But you never know. My point is there's plenty of space on the NASCAR side of things for Jimmie Johnson to run, the occasional race if he chooses, now that he has kind of a deal, a relationship with Chip Ganassi. But I'm extremely excited to see what Jimmie Johnson can do in an IndyCar next year and the year after. Jimmie Johnson is only 44 years old right now, and we've seen, at least on the NASCAR side of things, drivers like Mark Martin racing into his 50s and still contending for wins. I mean, Matt Kenseth right now, sure, he's having his worst statistical season of his career, but he's 48 years old. 44 years old, while that would be extremely old for most other professional sports in the US, that's not that old for a race car driver. Now, I don't know as much about IndyCar. Maybe 44 is kind of pushing it for IndyCar, where those cars, I mean, that's some quick reactions you need in those IndyCar cars. Again, forgive me, my IndyCar knowledge is about surface deep at this point, but I am looking forward to watching a few more IndyCar races next year and following Jimmie Johnson, seeing how he progresses. Overall, this is a big win just for, I think, American motorsports in general. In the last year, we've seen NASCAR and IndyCar kind of show a willingness at least to play nicer with each other. We saw that, of course, on full display this year when the Cup Series and the IndyCar Series actually ran a doubleheader at the same track in the same weekend, albeit with no fans in the stands, but that was still a pretty historic moment for the two series. Both sides seem to be playing a little bit nicer with each other, and I think that's great because, let's be quite honest, ratings and general interest in both series have dipped over the last several years, or 10, 15, many years, I guess. Neither series can really afford to be making enemies with each other or trying to divide their fan bases further. So obviously this is a bigger deal, I think, for IndyCar because they are basically taking a NASCAR superstar away from NASCAR and putting him into IndyCar for a good amount of the schedule. This is obviously huge for IndyCar, the same way when Danica Patrick left IndyCar to come to NASCAR, or Juan Pablo Montoya came to NASCAR. That was, in a lot of ways, that was big for NASCAR. Yeah, Montoya won a couple races. Danica obviously struggled, never really lived up to some of the hope behind her. But those were two big names that had had success in other motorsport series around the country or around the world in some cases. And so them coming to NASCAR, even though, the success in NASCAR wasn't as great as many people hoped, that was still huge for NASCAR. And so this is kind of the opposite in this case. This is now a NASCAR superstar, an established NASCAR star, moving over to IndyCar. And this is obviously huge for IndyCar. I think it's big for NASCAR as well, because I think it's great for Jimmie Johnson fans. They're still going to be engaged next year. We saw after 2017, the last year Dale Jr. raced in the Cup Series, TV ratings, attendance, everything in 2018 took a dropped significantly on the NASCAR side of things with no Dale Earnhardt Jr. racing each week. Jimmie Johnson, as great as he is, isn't quite as popular, doesn't move the needle quite the same way Dale Earnhardt Jr. does. But even though Jimmie Johnson won't be racing in NASCAR next year, and that is likely going to cause some Jimmie Johnson fans, and fair enough at least, to maybe lose some interest next year, at least Jimmie Johnson is still going to be racing on a fairly regular basis. And so hopefully those Jimmie Johnson fans who maybe are losing some interest because their drivers retired from NASCAR, hopefully that still keeps them interested in motorsports in general. Maybe they become more IndyCar fans, maybe they still pay attention to NASCAR. Overall, I think it's very loose and undefined at this point. I mean, there's no real hard data to look at to back up any of these claims, but I'll just leave it at this. I'm excited for IndyCar. I'm excited for Jimmie Johnson to go run something that he's been interested in racing for a while now. He said, remember during that test back in July at Indianapolis, and he reiterated it again recently, but that test lit a fire underneath him, so I'm excited for Jimmie Johnson. I hope he maybe finds some new life in IndyCar. His NASCAR career is obviously not ending the way he hoped it would. Maybe he goes out and make some headlines in IndyCar. That would be pretty crazy. I don't know. I don't really know enough about IndyCar Jimmie Johnson to make any sort of prediction. I know he's going to likely be in good equipment over there in IndyCar, but it's hard for me to make a prediction as to whether or not Johnson's going to maybe race for wins. Maybe he's going to get some wins. It's too early to say. It sounds like he's racing a lot of races though in 2021 and a good amount of races in 2022 as well. So I think over time he's going to get better, and I think eventually I wouldn't be shocked to see Jimmie Johnson contending for wins, maybe getting a win at some point, but I'll be curious to see how he starts out at least. I have a feeling it's going to be kind of slow going the first few races, but who knows. Anyway, I do want to touch briefly on some NASCAR playoffs news going into this weekend's race at Richmond. Saturday night, short track action. It's the first race at Richmond this year, and two playoff drivers will be without their crew chiefs for Saturday night's event. Both Kyle Busch and Clint Bowyer's cars were found to have two lug nuts loose at the end of Darlington's race, which means both of their crew chiefs have been suspended for Richmond. Greg Zipadelli will fill in for Clint Bowyer. Meanwhile, Jacob Cantor, an engineer at Joe Gibbs Racing, will fill in for Kyle Busch. Now, this is significant, of course, because both of those drivers are near the playoff cut line. I mean, if we look at the points right now, Kyle Busch is 10th, only 7 points to the good, and Clint Bowyer is actually tied for the final spot in the round of 12. So he is literally right on the cut line as they currently run. So that will definitely be a story to watch. We saw this last weekend at Darlington that Ryan Blaney, his crew chief, got suspended after failing inspection. And with Todd Gordon not there, Ryan Blaney struggled at Darlington. I mean, of course, Richmond and Bowyer and Kyle Busch, different situation, different track and everything, but I'm sure that's something they have to look at. Blaney is now 17 points out of the playoffs because he had one bad race. possibly as a result of not having his normal crew chief there. So definitely something to be concerned about if you're a Clint Bowyer or Kyle Busch fan. Imagine Kyle Busch being out in the first round. That would be probably the most 2020 thing to happen to Kyle Busch yet at this point. I also thought it was interesting. I saw a report apparently at the end of that Darlington race, Clint Bowyer and his team actually, I think, knew that they had probably more than one lug nut loose, but opted, instead of pitting and losing their decent running position in Sunday night's race, they just opted to go with with risking their crew chief being suspended. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We'll see how that pans out. Of course, Clint Bowyer is working with Greg Zipadelli, who's won championships as a crew chief with Tony Stewart back in the day. And actually, though, Greg Zipadelli did crew chief for Clint Bowyer at a race earlier this year. I think it was Michigan, and they didn't run particularly well. I think they finished 19th in that race. I don't really remember how they ran, but I just did a quick Google search. He finished 19th in that race. Not particularly great. Not going to cut it if that happens this week at Richmond. So definitely reason to be concerned, but Zippy's not bad. Zippy will figure something out. I have faith in Greg Zipadelli. Don't know anything about the canter guy for Kyle Busch, so we'll see what happens there. But anyway, just wanted to touch on some playoff news right there before the weekend. We still have a couple more days. We still have plenty more things to get to. I still want to talk a little bit more about some of the stuff that happened at Darlington and go in depth on some of that a little bit more. So I still got plenty of things I want to talk about before this weekend. It's a short week, so I'm scrambling over here, but thank you all for bearing with me. I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe if you are new to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. Of course, follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well. And a big thank you to my fantastic Patreon supporters. I couldn't do the show without their tremendous support. If you also want to support the show, check out that top link down in the description. I greatly appreciate it. Keep an eye on your subscription boxes. I don't really have a schedule this week, but expect some more videos before Saturday night. And of course, Saturday night I'll have my normal race review episode. I'm excited. It's the first race at Richmond this year. Oh man, there's already been so much news this week. Lord only knows what's going to happen the next couple of days, but we'll be here to talk about it if and when the big news drops, I suppose. I got some exciting things to announce here in the next few days as well, so stay tuned for that. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you again very, very soon.